So let us begin with the latest of the coups in Libreville, Gabon. It is our understanding that the African Union has taken some very swift action by suspending Gabon from all African Union activities in response to the recent coup. Now, the AU has also demanded a return to status quo, which is return power to civilian authorities in Gabon. African Union has also threatened sanctions and more sanctions if their demands are not met. Do you think the AU's approach will deter coups, or are they making the ECOWAS type of mistake again, Mr. Hundeyin?
They are absolutely repeating the ECOWAS mistake, as you call it. And the simple reason is that um, while it is obviously not out of the ordinary, or it's not a bad thing to demand that constitutional order should be restored when power is seized by force, um, the the fact of power being seized by force by somebody in a military uniform is not different from when power is seized by force by someone in civilian attire, when that person happens to be an incumbent or belonging to the incumbent party in power and doesn't respect the will of the people expressed through an electoral outcome. So what the AU and ECOWAS have in common is that they both, either by omission or by design, they both completely fail to acknowledge that when power is stolen by not respecting the outcome, the true outcome of an election, and when power is stolen by seizing power forcefully at the mouth of an AK-47, the two situations are not materially different. Just because somebody is wearing an agbada and the other person is wearing a khaki outfit doesn't make the one wearing the khaki outfit worse in any way. That's the the lack of respect for the will of the people is what those two instances both have in common. So where there's a military coup and a civilian government is toppled, that is not a significantly worse situation than where there's a civilian government that refuses to respect the outcome of the election expressed by the people, and it effectively steals the mandate of the people and arrogates it to itself, the same way the military does when it carries out a coup. As long as the AU fails to acknowledge that, then they're basically putting sticking plaster on the cancer. The coups will keep on happening because we are not addressing the root cause. The root cause is that the people in these countries do not feel that the governments have legitimacy. They do not feel represented by these governments. They do not feel like they voted for these governments, and they do not feel like these governments answer to them. No matter how much it is, the soldiers are power hungry, they want to grab power, whatever. If a coup does not have general support, the military will never pull it off. That's just how it works. The only time a coup is successful is when there's an appetite for it in the general population. I mean, we've had at last count at least 7 successful or semi-successful coups in Nigeria. And at every single instance where there was a coup in Nigeria, you could see that there was an appetite for it among the people. So if you are not dealing with the root cause, which is why is there an appetite among the population for the military or for anything to step in. It might not even be the military. It might just be that the people are so fed up that anything at all that looks like it's a departure from the status quo, they'll take it. So, which is why you see people dancing in the streets of Gabon now. Even now that it has turned out that the person who
Which
is
is
actually
almost
taking
supposed to be
over
is
is
almost
like
supposed to be
it's
like an irony. It's almost supposed to be like
exactly
an
because the
irony.
person who is taking over, yeah, it's like the king is dead, but long live the king. Because the person who is taking over is basically a cousin
Yeah,
of the
Ngema.
deposed head of state. So it's more of the same. However, the people are just so euphoric that at least we are seeing someone with a different name in power. There are people who 3 generations have passed in that country and they've only known one family or one surname in power. So if the AU is not dealing with that basic reality, that material reality, that where you have your Paul Bias and your Teodoro Obiangs and your Yoweri Museveni's, people who have been in power long before I was born, and they are still quote unquote winning elections, even though there's no proof that they actually win these elections. If you're not dealing with those realities, then you are wasting your time condemning coups and demanding that power should be returned to the civilians because you are not dealing with the root cause. So when they are ready, they will deal with the root cause if they ever decide to get ready.
Wow. Quite instructive. Okay, moving on. Immediately after this coup, two countries, one very close up north of Gabon, Cameroon, we have immediately seen
Yeah.
changes and appointments in the central administrative unit of the Cameroonian Defense Ministry and military architecture. Also, in Rwanda, President Paul Kagame has immediately approved the retirements of up to, I think, about 12 or even more generals, in the Rwandan military. Now, does this not underscore instability in the African region?
Well, yes, it does. And even above that, what it also shows is that a lot of these authoritarian regimes in Africa are not actually as strong or as solid internally as they like to project themselves, that there's always actually a risk that the status quo could change anytime. And the reason I found that very interesting, especially what happened in Cameroon, is that Paul Biya has created a sort of myth. He has created a reputation for himself as someone who is one of the very best at hanging on to power, who knows how to stage manage everything, and who knows how to position himself and play people off against each other in such a way that he always stays in power. And in fact, he's trying to position his son, allegedly,
Yeah.
to take over from him when he dies. But the fact of him, doing what was clearly a panicky move and reorganizing and basically paying the military to maintain the status quo, because that's what he did. He increased their salaries
Yes, we
drastically, the
heard.
upper echelons,
Yes, we
which
heard.
could be interpreted as essentially a bribe. So
Yeah.
what to me, what that tells me is that internally the power position that these people have is not as strong as you might think it is, and that they is in as much as it's tempting to think of it as just a one-man show, there is actually a group of people around them who are happy for that one man to remain there. And if those group of people should ever so decide that they are no longer happy with it, that situation can change very rapidly, which is exactly what happened in Gabon. So I think what 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 this tells us is that um, the the one man that we look at in some of these countries, be it Cameroon, be it Uganda, be it Togo, be it Equatorial Guinea, that one man, it's very tempting to just think of him as like this sort of hate figure, this devil. But actually, a dictatorship is not just one person. There's always a group of people, a cartel.
Almost like an
So,
institution.
in
I agree.
trying to exactly. So, in trying to solve the problem of long running, long standing dictatorships, whether military or civilian in Africa, it's more instructive to look beyond who the figurehead is and look at the people around them. And I guess a good example of this would be when Robert Mugabe was deposed. For many decades, he was the point man. He was the face at the forefront of the ZANU PF dictatorship. And then when he was deposed, it became very clear that it wasn't actually just a Mugabe show. There was actually a clique of core, the ZANU PF, military veterans and loyalists
Yeah.
around him who were actually the dictatorship. And they chose a new figurehead who happened to be the current head of state, Ed Nangagwa. When this person eventually, he gets too old or whatever, the same thing will probably happen to him too. So,
Two.
in trying to solve the problem of dictatorship, I think people who are invested in this issue need to look beyond the figurehead and start looking at who are the people around them, who are the actual power brokers. I think that's
Exactly.
that's the instructive thing.